Welcome to this YSL tutorial. In this video we're going to explain how you can use the RefEdit control on your Excel VBA user forms. So the video is all about how you can use a user form to select cells on a worksheet in Excel. We're going to start by explaining how you can add the RefEdit control to the control toolbox, and then how you can draw a RefEdit on your form and refer to the value that it returns. We're going to cover a few basic examples of how you can make use of the cell references returned by the RefEdit, and then we're going to go into a few basic problems, some known issues with the RefEdit control, to make sure you're aware of these potential problems and avoid falling into the same traps that some people do. Right towards the end of the video we're going to have a quick look at a couple of basic alternatives to the RefEdit, just in case those potential problems are enough to put you off using them. So let's get started. If you've ever designed a user form in Excel VBA and you've needed your users to be able to select cells on a worksheet, then a RefEdit is the control you've been looking for. It's a fairly basic control, but what it allows me to do is while the form is running, I can click into the background of the worksheet and select some cells. I can do that for a single continuous block of cells, or I can also do it for a non-contiguous block of cells. And once I've selected those cells, I've got a nice simple way to reference them in my code. I've set up a couple of basic buttons and I can do anything to the range of cells that I've selected based on the code that I've written. So here's a simple one that formats the cells I've selected, here's one that copies the cells I've selected to a new worksheet, and here's another one that creates a chart out of the selected cells. So whatever it is I want to do to the range of selected cells, I can write code to do it in a relatively simple way. So this little video is going to show you how to add a RefEdit control to your toolbox, how to draw one on the form, how to reference the values or the cell references you've returned, and then how you can do a few simple things with it as well. Starting with a brand new blank Excel workbook then, let's head straight into the Visual Basic editor, so we can do that from the Developer tab and choose Visual Basic. And then from there we're going to insert a new user form into the project. So as usual, you can right click in the Project Explorer, choose Insert, and then choose User Form. All I'm bothered about at this point is the ability to draw a RefEdit control on our form, and by default you won't be able to do that because the RefEdit control isn't added to the toolbox. It's not one of the default controls. So to add that RefEdit control to the toolbox, the simplest thing to do is just right click on the background of the toolbox and choose Additional Controls. Now eventually a dialog box will appear, and we've done this a few times in previous videos in this series where you wanted to add an additional control to your toolbox. So in this case the name of the control is called RefEdit. So if you scroll all the way down, they're listed alphabetically, so you'll find eventually the RefEdit control. Make sure you place a check in the box or a cross in the box next to that. It's not sufficient just to click on his name, and then click OK, and you'll now have the RefEdit control sitting on the toolbox. Now that you have the RefEdit control on the toolbox, drawing one on the form is just the same as drawing any other type of control. So you can click once on the tool, and then either click and drag, or even just click once on the form, and your RefEdit control will be drawn. You can resize it in the usual way. Now, the way this control works is designed, of course, to allow you to pick cells on the background of a worksheet. So if I simply click on the background of my form and run it, then you'll find that whenever this control is active, when it's been clicked into, whenever it's got the focus, I can click onto a single cell in the background of the worksheet, or I can click and drag. You'll see if I click and drag that the entire form minimizes down to the bare minimum size it needs to be to display the RefEdit and just the title bar of the form. I can do a similar thing if I want to sort of manually reduce the size of the form. I can click on the little selector button at the right hand side of the RefEdit, and then I can click and drag in the background, and when I'm finished I can click back on that little selector button. So it behaves essentially a lot like, or indeed identically to, the cell selector, the range selector buttons on built-in Microsoft dialog boxes or Excel dialog boxes. So that's how you actually use the control. You can as well, of course, just type in a cell reference if you really wanted to. One of the slightly annoying things about that is it doesn't show you the range that you're selecting. So I've modified the cell selection here to, let's say, I know, row 30. You won't see the range in the background, but whenever I do click and drag on the background of the sheet, it shows me the cells that I've selected. So that's how you use it in a basic fashion. How can we actually then make use of the value that's returned by the RefEdit control? Let's close the form down, head back to the design view of the form, and see how we can do that. Just to demonstrate the basics of what the RefEdit returns, let's draw a command button below it on the form, and we're just going to make a quick event handler that will display a message box returning the value of the RefEdit. So the simplest way to do that, of course, is to double click the command button, which gives us the command button's click event handler, and then we can add a simple little line of code to say message box, and then we can reference the RefEdit control. So I didn't change its name, it's still called RefEdit1. If I want a bit of help, of course, I can press Control and space to display the IntelliSense and look for RefEdit1, and I can look for its value property. So having done that, if I just switch back to the form in Design View by double-clicking, click on the background of the form and run it again, I'm going to select a block of cells and then click my command button, and it shows me exactly what you'd expect. It's just a simple string of text representing the address of the range of cells that I've selected. So how can we make use of that? What can we do with that little bit of information? Let's close down the form and the message box, go back to the design view and think of something else more interesting we can do with this command button's click event. At a very basic level then, you can simply use the value returned by the RefEdit to refer to the range that you've selected. So instead of a message box here, let's replace the word message box with the word range, and ordinarily of course you'd then open a set of parentheses and you write out the cell references that you wanted to return a reference to. What we're going to do here instead is use the value of the RefEdit control. So we're going to say range RefEdit1.value, and then we've got access to all the methods and properties of the range that we've selected. So what can we do just for something simple to demonstrate? Let's change the interior color index of the range. Let's make it equal to a random number. So I'm going to use the worksheet function randBetween function to return a number between 1 and 56, which is the range of color index numbers. So, having done that, if I now go back to the form, and I select the form and then run it again, if I pick a block of cells and I click the command button, it changes the background colour of those cells to a random colour. So each time I click it, it generates a new random number. And whatever block of cells I select, it will change that block of cells. Keep on forgetting to click back on the actual RefEdit control, of course. So, really simply, whatever bit of text gets returned by the RefEdit control, you can use to refer to that range of cells. So let's close the form down and see if we can think of something more interesting to do instead. Let's say we had some actual data to work with then. Let's head back into Excel briefly, and I think we'll have a new worksheet to demonstrate this, so we'll have a new sheet, and I just want to generate some quick sample data. So I'm going to put in a couple of quick column headers. I'm going to put in an ID column header, then a name column header, a date, and a value. And we're just going to generate some really quick, simple, random data. So if I type in 1 and 2 for the ID numbers and then fill those down about 10 rows or so. One more, let's go again. And then for the name, I don't really care. I can type in any old random bit of text for the name. It really doesn't matter at all. And then for the date, I'm just going to fill in quickly today's date. The quickest way to do that is to click in a cell and press Control semicolon on the keyboard. Or you can just type in a specific date if you wanted to. I can fill that date down just by double clicking on the little autofill handle in the bottom right hand corner. And then finally for the value, I'm going to select all 10 rows and then I'm going to type in equals randBetween. So this is the same function we've just used in the VBA code. I'm going to generate a random number between 1, 100. I want to populate all 10 selected cells at this point, so I'm going to press Control Enter to fill in all 10 cells. And then I want those numbers to not be random anymore, so I don't want them to be calculated each time I change something about the worksheet. So what I'm going to do is Control C to copy, and then I'm going to use paste special values. One quick way that you can do that is you can press Alt H V for paste special values. So you'll see now that the function has disappeared and it's just made the numbers fixed. So a tiny little bit of formatting. I don't want to spend too much time doing this, but a really quick little bit of formatting, and then we've got a bit of sample data to work with to do something a bit more interesting and useful with the RefEdit control. So let's say in this example, rather than randomly colouring in the selected cells, let's maybe make it so that we can select a block of cells and have those cells copied to a new worksheet. So back to the VB editor to do this, and I'm going to go straight back to the code behind the command button one click event. And rather than just changing the interior colour index of the cell, what I'd like to be able to do is copy it to a new sheet. So before I do that, let's create a new worksheet in the code. So I'm going to say worksheets.add, and then what we can do is we can say range refedit1.value, not .interior.colorIndex equals. We can replace all of that with a reference to the copy method. And then we can specify that the destination for the copy method will be range A1 on the new worksheet that we've just created. So if we've just added a new worksheet, then it automatically becomes the active sheet and we'll have cell A1 selected. So all I'm going to do here is say copy it to the active cell. Nice and quick and simple. But let's go back to the form then and run the form again. And this time let's select, well, any old random block of cells, doesn't really matter. And if I click Command button 1, we ought to see that that block of cells gets selected, copied, and moves to a new sheet. Just like with a regular range selector in Excel, you're allowed to select more than one region of cells in the same RefEdit. So if I run the form again, and this time I want to go back to sheet 2 where I put my bit of sample random data, what I'd like to be able to do is select just a few specific rows. So let's say I want to select row 1 or row ID 1, and then if I hold down the control key I can then click and drag on a non-contiguous range of cells, and if I continue holding down the control key I can select as many individual regions as I like. So you'll see that in the RefEdit you get essentially a comma-separated list of cell references. And this is a perfectly valid entry into the range property. You can refer to a comma-separated list of cell references to refer to non-contiguous cells. So if I click the Command button again, we'll end up with yet another new sheet, and in there we'll get a list of only the rows that we selected from the main list of data. So basically the RefEdit control is great whenever you need the user to select a range of cells to operate on. Let's do one more quick example where we can allow the user to create a chart based on the range of cells they've selected. So I'm going to draw another different button on my form this time, so let's draw another command button, and again I'm not going to bother renaming it, we'll just accept all the default names. Then I can simply double click on the button to give me the click event handler. So all we're going to do in this case is we're going to create a new chart. So I'm going to declare a variable actually first to store a reference to the chart. I'm going to say dimc as chart. At some point we will have an actual proper video on just charts and all the things you can do with charts in VBA. That'll be part of the main Excel VBA tutorial series. But just for now we'll do this in the simplest way possible. We're going to say set c equals charts.add. And then what we're going to do is use the setSourceData method to refer to the range of cells we want to use to populate the chart. So to do that we can say c.setSourceData, and then there's a single compulsory parameter which is source as range. So of course whenever we need to reference a range we can use the value of our RefEdit 1 control. So we can say range open parentheses RefEdit1.value. And then having done that, let's go back to the design view of the form and then click on its background and then run it one more time. And again I'm going to go back to my main list of data on sheet 2 and I'm going to highlight, let's highlight column, a few cells in column B, let's highlight 5 rows and the header cell. Then again if I hold down the control key and select the corresponding cells in column D, if I click command button 2 I'll end up with a new chart referring to the rows that I've selected. And many other uses I'm sure you can think of. Essentially anywhere where you need your user to select a range of cells to affect what your code does, the RefEdit control is absolutely perfect for that. Now, although a RefEdit control is a really handy, convenient thing to have, there are a few things about RefEdits that are slightly more unreliable than things I've shown you so far. So just before I demonstrate those, I've made sure that I've saved my workbook as a macro-enabled workbook, just to make sure that when things inevitably go wrong in this next little section, I've got a workbook to get back to. The first thing that can go wrong, a really easy thing to get wrong here actually, is using a RefEdit control on a form that is modeless. So forms can run in two different modes, modal and modeless. And by default, all user forms in VBA will run in modal. So you can see there's a property called showModal, and it's set to true by default. So just to demonstrate what that means, because I don't think I've explained this in previous videos, if I just draw a quick symbol text box on my form, and then I'm going to run my form as and showing it modal, if I click into my text box, I'll find that I can't click into the background of Excel. So I'm locked out from doing that. The form has the focus and I can't take the focus away from the form. RefEdits work slightly differently to that. Even though the form is modal, if I click into the RefEdit control, you'll see, of course, you can click into the background of Excel and you can select cells. But if I click into another object, another control in the form, I'm prevented from doing that. So let's close down the form and go back to the design view and show you what happens when the form is modaless. So with the form selected, I can head down to the properties window and find the show modal property and change it from true to false. The simplest way to do that is just to double click the word true to switch it to false. Then if I run the form again, What I should find this time is that although I can, with the RefEdit control selected, of course, I can still click in the background and select cells. If I tried to click on any other control in the form, I can't do that. I might be able to tab away from the RefEdit control, so I can tab to the command button 1, but trying to tab any further does nothing. I can't tab backwards with shift and tab, I can't click any buttons, I can't press enter to do anything, I can't close the form down, I can't click into Excel, I can't close the Excel down, so I'm a bit stuck at this point basically. What I might be able to do, if I'm lucky, is I might be able to right-click on the taskbar in Excel, and I might be able to choose Close Window. If this fails, then the other solution, of course, is to use the Task Manager application to quit from Excel, or just kill the Excel task, end task. Quickest way to launch Task Manager is to hold down Control, Shift, and hit Escape. So Control, Shift, Escape should launch Task Manager, and then you ought to be able to right-click on Excel and choose End Task. So if that works, then we'll end up with Excel closed down, hopefully. Excellent. And then I ought to be able to just double click on the file that I saved earlier on just to reopen it. So there's one of the bigger dangers of working with RefEdits, using them in a modeless form. So I'm not going to get back to my recovered file. I'm just going to close down that window and then head straight back to the VB editor window and make sure that my form is set to modal, so its show modal property is true. So that's certainly the main potential issue with RefEdit controls, running them in modeless forms, but various websites and various sources report other potential issues with them as well. So for instance, some places report issues when you put a RefEdit control inside either a frame or a multi-page control. So if I were to draw a frame on the form, we've dealt with frames in a previous video, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, and then you draw your RefEdit control inside the frame, then some people report issues with that. Personally, I haven't experienced that myself, and I can't seem to be able to make anything go wrong with them in this particular example. So just something to be aware of for the future. Likewise, multi-page controls, and again, we've made a video on multi-page controls, it's part of this series, but if you draw your RefEdit control in a multi-page, then apparently some people have experienced difficulties with those. We talked about control events in a few different videos in this series, and there are events of RefEdit controls as well. Some people have reported issues with unreliability to do with the events of the RefEdit control. So to see the events of a RefEdit, you can simply double click on one of them in your form design, and then that will generate the default event handler for the default event of the control, which is in this case before drag over. There's a whole bunch of other events of a RefEdit, some similar to most of the other form controls you'd expect to see in a VBA user form. Again, I haven't personally experienced difficulties with these myself, but other people have reported issues. So there's a whole range of different possibilities for things that can go wrong with RefEdits. So just to wrap up this video, we're going to have a really quick look at one potential alternative to using the RefEdit control. And again, we've actually made a video on this previously as part of the Excel VBA series, but it's using the built-in Excel application input box. Let's demonstrate this then by getting rid of a few of the objects on the form first of all. So I'm just going to click and drag a box around a bunch of the controls and then hit the delete key to get rid of them. Let's add in a new command button. So I'm going to draw a new command button somewhere else on the form and then double click on it to give me the event handler for that. Now when I click this button, I'd like an input box to appear, allowing me to select a range of cells. Now there are two types of input box in Excel VBA. There's the standard VBA input box, which works across all the Office applications, and there's also a dedicated specific Microsoft Excel input box. So that's the type we're going to use, the dedicated Excel application input box. And I've made a video on this as part of the main Excel VBA tutorial series, so if you want a bit more detail about how this works, feel free to have a look at that video. We're just going to focus on the specific parts here for selecting cells. So I'm going to first of all declare a variable that's going to hold a string. I'm going to call this something like cell refs as string, and then I'm going to say cell refs equals application.inputbox, open some parentheses, then there are two parameters I need to specify here. So first of all the prompt, which is compulsory anyway, so I'm just going to set this to be equal to a phrase that says something like select cells, and then the second parameter I'm going to specify is the type. Now the application input box can return a variety of types of information, and what we're trying to do here is return type 0, which returns a formula. Now a formula can be something as simple as just a reference to a range of cells. So if I say type colon equals 0, and then close the parentheses, and then just to demonstrate what this does, give myself a message box which will display cell refs. Having done all that, I'm going to go back to the design view of the form and run it again. And then if I click on my command button that I've just created, I'll see this input box appears. So if I do what it says and click and drag in the background, you'll see it's sort of non-modal. So I can, just like with a RefEdit control, I can click into cells in the background. And if I click OK, I'll see a message box pop up showing me the cell references in the R1C1 format by default, as it turns out. One thing that might be useful here is to change the R1C1 format into the standard A1 format. So let's click OK on the message box and then close the form down, and then go back to the code behind the command button and look at how we can modify that so it shows the cell refs in A1 format. I can convert between cell referencing styles using another method of the application object. So just after the message box here, I'm going to say application.convert formula. And then if I open some parentheses, I'll see there's a couple of compulsory parameters. The first one is the formula itself. So the formula I'm trying to convert is cell refs. Then after that, I've got to specify what style it's currently in. So from reference style, XL R1C1. One more comma, and then I've got third optional parameter to reference style. And the to reference style is XL A1. If I then close the parentheses and then I can run this again, I'm just going to run this directly from the code this time. So if I just click Run Sub-User Form, click Command Button 3, select a block of cells, getting so tedious at this point, click OK, and then I've got my references returned in A1 format instead. One other issue with the input box returning a formula is it is returned as a formula, so that is with an equals operator at the start of it. So if I wanted to return just the cell referencing part, then I need to remove the equals operator. A simple way to do that is using the mid function. If I just close down the message box and then close down the form, go back to the code behind the button, I can say message box mid, open some parentheses, then I've got to return the string that I'm trying to get my characters from, so that's all of this application convert formula, followed by a comma right at the end, and the starting position of the characters that I want to return is position number 2. So start giving me information from the second character, so that will just skip over the equals operator. If I close the parentheses again and run it one more time, we ought to find that this time, if I select click on my command button and then select some cells and then click OK, it returns just the cell reference. So at this point, everything apart from the name of the worksheet, which you may remember the RefEdit gives us the name of the sheet as well, so it gives me sheet 2 exclamation mark. If I wanted to add that part in, that's not such a big deal either. I can close down the form and then go back to the code behind the button, and then I can concatenate the name of the sheet. So I could say something like active sheet dot name. Beg your pardon, I'll spell name properly eventually, and then concatenate that with an exclamation mark, so in some double quotes an exclamation mark, and then concatenate that with the rest of the formula that I've created so far. It gets longer and longer and more convoluted, but if I run this one more time and then click my command button and then select some cells and then click OK, I've got finally now the same answer that I got originally with the RefEdit. So I could use that cell reference in exactly the same way as I did with the RefEdit earlier on. It can be passed into the range property to return a reference to that range of cells. So let's click OK, close the form down, and then there's one final thing just to quickly look at. So we've seen that generating the cell address of a range of cells using the input box is a little bit awkward because of all the things you've got to do to tweak it to get the right result at the end. So one final possibility, if I draw one more command button on my form and then double click it to get the event handler, we're going to use another input box, but this time we're not going to return a string of text from the input box. What we're going to do instead is we're going to return a range reference. So I'm going to say dim r as range. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say set r equals application dot input box, and then again the prompt will be something like select cells. I should have just copied and pasted this rather than laboriously typing it out, but never mind, I've gotten there now. So prompt select cells followed by a comma, and then finally the type parameter this time is going to be number 8. Now type number 8 returns a reference to a range object, not just the cell reference of those cells or the formula. So having done that, I haven't got anything to do at all should I want to do anything to manipulate those cells. I could say something like worksheets.add and then say r.copy, so I can apply methods directly to the range of cells that I've referenced with the input box. I say r.copy and copy that to the active cell, which will be cell A1 on the new worksheet. Or I could generate a chart out of the cells I've created, or I could delete them, or I could format them, or I could do anything else to that range of cells that I want, just by applying methods and properties directly to the object. So just to check that this works, if I run the subroutine from the VBA editor and I click my command button 4, I can select some cells, and again I can happily do that just by clicking and dragging, and then click OK, and it will do something to that range of cells directly. So there you go, there's a few different options for you there over and above the basic RefEdit control. RefEdits are useful, you just have to take care with the way that you use them. So hopefully this video has given you an overview, things to watch out for, and a couple of alternatives as well. Hope that was useful. Thanks for watching, see you next time. If you like what you've seen here, why not head over to the WiseL website, where you can find loads more free resources, including these videos, some written blogs and tutorials, and even some exercises that you can download to practice your skills. Thanks for watching, see you next time.